All right. So the first question I got was, bro, why does my master still sound wimpy? I'm slamming my limiter, my meters look loud, but next to my favorite metal tracks, it still sounds like a wet noodle. What am I doing wrong? This is the first question that I got, and it's all about mastering. So there's a lot to dive into on mastering, and I'm going to dive into that today. If this is your first time here, I'm Andrew Barr. I'm a professional music producer based out of Pennsylvania, United States. And I'm here to answer your questions. This is question number 1 of 10 questions today. So let's first dive into this session. And I like to mix and master in the same session. Other people like to render things out and have things in different sessions. That's completely fine. It doesn't matter, but the concept remains the same. Mastering is all about processing everything together all at once. So I'm going to set up a master bus here. And I can come over here to my master bus or my main bus or my stereo bus or 2-bus. They're all the same thing. They're just called something different. And we want a handful of things here on our master bus. Typically, you're going to find a limiter. Most people are going to have a limiter on their master bus to kind of bring things up overall. Now, the problem is, as soon as you hit the limiter, you're going to bring the volume up, but it's not going to sound nearly as loud as some of your other mixes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off everything here, and I'm going to start right from scratch. So why does it sound wimpy? Why am I'm slamming my limiter and it's not working? So let's first grab L4, which is a common waves maximizer limiter. And what I'm going to do is I am going to bring down the threshold, and I'm going to bring the ceiling to negative 0.1. Now, this is really important. We want the ceiling at negative 0.1 no matter what limiter we're using. The reason is small phone speakers, Google Home speakers, and some consumer-grade devices can't replicate 0. It used to be negative 0.5, then we would set things to negative 0.3. And for a while now, it's been at negative 0.1 because Spotify, Apple Music, and a lot of those other platforms will be able to kind of like make up for that change in volume. But we want to make sure that we're not going above 0. So we always set our ceiling here to negative 0.1. And that ceiling is the actual signal that's coming through. Now, that's the first caveat here, which is you're like, my meters look great. I'm hitting negative 0.1, but it's still not as loud as I want. And that's where the second section comes in here, which is LUFS. LUFS. Now, this is something that this limiter won't tell you. Is they're going to show you the LUFS, and there's some lots of really good stuff here. But it's not going to tell you exactly what the LUFS actually means. But it's kind of hidden behind a couple other things. They just kind of they're kind of hoping that you assume or you don't care. So what LUFS means is loudness unit full scale. So I like to imagine it like this, right? So I think of it like a roller coaster. So imagine we have a roller coaster here. We got some ups and downs and some overall stuff here like this, right? And we have our little guy riding on the roller coaster right here, right? He's like, whoa, this is crazy cool. Woohoo. He's like way too high. He's definitely going to get clipped off somewhere in the top end. But nevertheless, so he's going down here. He's having some fun, but he's coming up high and he's coming way down low. And so I think of our music as a roller coaster. Now what happens is your song is like this. And what you do is you try to slam it with some limiting and try to get some control over this. And so you're kind of like bringing everything up overall, but like you can't go above that threshold line, right? And so what happens is in your mix, your guy may get to that, negative 0.1 a handful of times. But in a professional mix and master, specifically in the rock and metal space, the EDM space, and it's going to be different depending on the genre that you're in. So please keep that in mind. You should absolutely be grabbing reference tracks in the genre that you're in, drag it into your DAW, and see where they're hitting in their levels and go from there. But for now, for this argument, because I have a rock and metal song that's kind of in my DAW right now, I'm going to use that as an example. Specifically in that genre, most of these peaks are actually going to be up here. So our song is going to be a lot more closer to that top end. We're actually kind of killing some of the dynamics in this case, but we're getting a louder mix overall, right? And the reason why I'm saying rock and metal, I typically make a lot of rock and metal, but also the question specifically said favorite metal track sounds like, compared to his favorite metal tracks, it sounds like a wet noodle. So we want to bring everything up overall. And this is where LUFS comes into play. So we can have negative 0.1 and hit that. So let's take a look. Let's play this song here, and let's take a look at what we have. So if you see here, we're hitting negative 0.1, right? That's pretty good, right? Now, negative 0.1, that's the signal that's coming through. Now, let me turn off this limiter, and let me turn on my mastering chain that I have. And listen to how much louder it actually sounds now. But wait a minute, Andrew, you're probably asking. It's still at negative 0.1. The actual signal hasn't gotten any louder. So what gives? How is this actually happening? Well, the difference is LUFS, the LUFS, also known as loudness unit full scale. And so we had to create this thing called a loudness unit because there's a thing called perceived volume. There's the signal that's coming through, and you saw that negative 0.1 was the signal coming through. We had to create a thing called loudness unit full scale. And when I say we, I mean the people in the music industry that have been doing this for a long time. Because loudness unit full scale basically just means we had to create some sort of loudness unit because we hear things differently. Even though the signal was the same, the second mix, my mastering chain sounded way, way louder. So how is that even possible? So loudness unit full scale, they created a loudness unit, and they have a thing called a K weighting filter. So let me open up a metering software here. So I'm going to open up SSL Meter Pro. It doesn't matter what metering software you have, just as long as you can see what the K weighting filter is. I believe SSL Meter Pro has it. So we have our integrated. Are we able to change? Maybe not. We may have to go to, yeah, let's go to waves. So I can actually really kind of give you guys an example. I believe it's waves WLM. Awesome. Yeah, so we're going to grab WLM meter stereo. And you can down here see there's a weighting section. And then there's what's called a K weighting filter. And so what it does is it puts a filter because 100 decibels of 100 hertz or 50 hertz sounds way different than 100 decibels of 4K, for example. So we have to kind of create this weighting filter so that way as it's listening to the signal, it's giving a weight to it. So that way it kind of more emulates more closely to what humans can hear. Once again, like I'm going to go very specific. I'm going to get very nerdy, and then I'm going to show you how to actually like implement this for yourself. So let's take a look at what our LUFS are. We have long-term, short-term. This is a ridiculously loud mix. I probably don't need to go this loud with it, but let's take a look. Negative 4 LUFS is stupid loud. Like that is not necessary at all, not even close to necessary. But for the sake of argument here, I'm showing you what that is. So we have a really loud mix. Now, once again, we're still hitting that negative 0.1. So let me turn off my mastering chain that I have here, and let me just turn on the limiter that we had before, still hitting that negative 0.1. And we can see that our LUFS is now at like negative 10, right? So the short term is whatever happened in the last 3 seconds. The long term is basically the duration of the song. So we really want to pay attention to our short term. So negative 9, negative 10, which is the limiter. Then with the mastering chain, negative 4. Even though we still hit negative 0.1 on the actual master bus on the way out. That's the difference between actual peak volume, the signal that's coming through, and your LUFS, LUFS, or loudness unit full scale. The loudness unit full scale actually shows you the perceived volume. It's a way better way of actually understanding how people will actually hear stuff. That's that perceived volume. So definitely use a LUFS meter if you don't already. Super helpful. Now, there's one other, actually, I don't want to get too early into the question there because I already have my questions ready to go. So I have all questions ready to go today. Still feel free to ask some in the live for those of you guys watching the live, but I'm already all ready to go. So we'll just have some bonus ones at the end for those of you guys that ask questions live. So now that we have this, how do we actually get there? All right. So now you're like, okay, Andrew, I get it. There's LUFS, loudness unit full scale. Basically, you can make it sound louder. I get that. Like, I understand this. Now what do I do? What do I do? Okay, so let's actually break this down. So there's typically 3 tools that I like to have on my master bus. The first is some type of clipper. The second is some type of compressor. And then third is a limiter. And that's typically what I go for and what I shoot for now. It doesn't really matter what tools you have. You can also add a fourth one, EQ. Sometimes I need EQ as well, but typically this is what I go for. So the clipper is going to clip any of those transients that are coming through. So this will actually give us a ton of headroom. Now, if you're seeing that I have a gain plugin here at the beginning of my master bus, that's just a gain plugin. I like to change my gain structure up or down depending on how it's actually reacting to the compressor. So the more signal you send through the mastering chain or the less signal you send through the mastering chain, the more it's going to sound different. And once again, it could be better, it could be worse, but it's just definitely going to sound different. So I always like to have a gain plugin at the beginning of my master chain, and then I adjust it up or down until I feel like it's sounding really, really good. That's just something I've been doing for a while, and I really like it. I can change my gain structure at any point in time with a simple plugin. And so what I want to do is I want to go in here and I want to grab the clipper and I want to control some of those snare drums, specifically the snares. There's a lot going on there in that snare, and that snare will kind of peak up and I want to clip it off if at all possible. So let's make that happen. So you can see that snare's poking up through. Even though I want it that loud, I still have to make some sacrifices. So I use a clipper to kind of clip that. Once again, it's not really changing too much of the volume, but it's giving me a lot of headroom. And for those of you guys that are like, what's a clipper? I have entire videos of that on my YouTube channel. Just go look it up. Limiter versus clipping. I believe there's a video on that as well. So just go to my YouTube channel, look it up. But clipping is just going to take that transient and it's going to clip it off. So then it's giving me a little bit of headroom. Then I'm going to go into my compressor. Sometimes I will do my compressor first and then my clipper. Sometimes I'll do clipping first and then my compressor. It's just, I go back and forth all the time. It's really easy to just like switch the order of plugins. Like, look at how easy this is. Boom, boom. It's so easy. And so when people are like, what should go first? It's like, just try it. Test it out. See what works best. See what sounds best. I don't know all the time. Sometimes this direction sounds better. Sometimes clipping first sounds better. Then sometimes compression first sounds better. It's going to be different per song. But look how easy it is to just switch and test. So if you're ever wondering, like, what order should I put my plugins in? Test them. Just see. It's so easy to switch it and see what sounds better and make a decision for yourself. That's all part of being a mixing and mastering engineer. All right? Being a producer. We get to make creative decisions sometimes. All right. So now that we've got this set up, we are at a compressor, and I'm shooting for around -1 to -2 dB of gain reduction. So a ratio of 4 to 1 is what I have. I have my release set to a little bit faster, and then I'm just bringing up my threshold until I'm getting like -2 dB of gain reduction, maybe a bit more. And then I have my makeup gain, bring it up. So I'm cutting it by about 1.4 dB. So now I'm using my makeup gain to boost it. And so I'm getting a little bit more control over this. So once again, my clipper and my compressor are getting control over those peaks and is giving me more perceived volume and more headroom to go into my limiter. And once again, then here I'm using Infected Mushroom Pusher. I actually have it set to clip mode instead of limit, but once again, it doesn't really matter which direction I flip it. Clip will push it out a little bit further because once again, it's like bringing up the volume, and I believe it's actually doing clipping and limiting at the same time. At least that's what it sounds like to me. And then there's the limit mode. So I'm using a limiter, and then I have some of the magic turned up and the dynamic punch, which from my understanding is essentially some compression, maybe some expansion on the magic kind of sounds like some saturation. The dynamic punch kind of sounds like some expansion. I'm not entirely sure. That's basically about it. And that's how I'm able to get that really loud mix, right? But the kicker here is the clipper. And I'm using Kilohertz clipper. It's free. It's phenomenal. And I think it's one of the best, most transparent sounding clippers there are out there. And then I'm using a compressor to kind of get control over that. So if you're just slamming into the limiter like we did before, you need a bit more. Now, once again, the L4 is great because it has the LUFS like reader here. And you can also see that there's a clipping section here too, right? So there's some new stuff here that we have. And so once again, we can get somewhat of a better result. So we'll set our ceiling to -0.1. That's extremely important. At the end of every master chain, you should have a limiter and set that at -0.1 for the most part. Once again, I know people that don't. They're one of the rare ones. And so we'll bring our threshold down and keep bringing it down until we're getting that mix like really loud the way we want it to. Just bring our clip up. bring our upwards compression here. Or upwards limiting, I guess. Clipping, limiting and compression are very similar, but like saying they're the same is like saying a school bus is the same as a sedan, two-seater car. Like they do similar things, but they are different tools. We need to understand that. So yeah, I'm going to bring up some upward, and from my understanding, it's upward limiting. And yeah, -5. That's plenty loud enough. So once again, always make sure that you're bringing in your own reference tracks, figuring out like your favorite songs, what LUFS are they hitting at, and that's what you should be hitting at as well, because you already know you like it. You already like how loud that is. You already like the sound of that. You already like how squashed or not squashed the dynamics are. So have a reference track in mind before you start like looking at a LUFS number and saying that that's perfect. All right. So once again, I'm Andrew Barr. If this is your first time here, welcome. I'm a professional music producer, typically working in rock, metal, big drums, big stuff, the big sounds like that, and I am out of Pennsylvania, the United States. So for those of you guys that do want to work with me, if you're like, my gosh, this stuff sounds good, I'd love to work with him in one way or another, you want me to open up sessions with you, listen to your music, actually dive into sessions with you, see what that actually looks like, you can click the link down in the description below, click on the Work For Me link, and you can figure out exactly how to work with me there. You can book a free call and see if we're actually a good fit. Everything is on that page, so click on that. It's down in the description, and I'll have it pinned in the comments as well. All right, so the second question that I got today was, do I need to hit my limiter at a specific level? I've heard everything from -18 to -6. I'm completely lost. So you're not going to be lost anymore. I'm here to help you. So when it comes to hitting your limiter and going into your master bus, right, we're talking a lot about mastering today, and I kind of like picked these questions specifically for that. When we get into our master bus, I showed you earlier, and I kind of teased at this a little bit earlier, but I like to have a gain tool at the beginning of my plugin chain. And the reason is I can make decisions based off of how it sounds instead of looking at the specific numbers, right? And so once again, I'm just going to leave L4 on for now. I think it's fine. But what I can do is if I turn the gain up or down, right, it's going to change the gain structure going into that plugin, right? So my entire mastering chain. In fact, actually, I'm going to turn off L4. I'm going to turn on my clipper, my compressor, and then my limiter here, because I want you to be able to hear the difference of the gain hitting the clipper, the compressor, and everything else. So I put a gain tool at the beginning, right? If I'm using Studio One, so it's just mix tool. In Pro Tools, I believe it's just the trimming plugin. And if you're like not sure, like there is a free gain plugin from Kilohertz, but every single DAW has some sort of gain plugin. And so what we want to do is we just want to put it at the beginning here of our master bus, and then we can adjust the gain structure up or down, and we can see how it sounds. So we're not going for like -18 or -6. We're actually going for a sound more than we are a specific number. The more gain that you bring into that mastering chain, the more it's going to distort. You're going to lose some dynamics, and the less you have, the cleaner it's going to sound, but you're going to lack some punch because of that. And so we want to like just turn it up, turn it down, and see what sounds best. That sounds great to me. Let's test it at the loudest part, though. So right around that -2.4, -2.5 is giving me that perfect balance of punch and clarity. So once again, it's not a number. It's what works. And in this case, I think this works the best, just being able to adjust it. So just quit it, just ignore the numbers. Make sure that you have some sort of headroom. Like make sure that you're not clipping going on the way in. But even then, if you were clipping going on the way into your master chain, like you could still just put a gain tool there and turn it down. So stop looking at the numbers, right? The YouTubers that are telling you these specific numbers, they just, no disrespect to any of them, but they have no idea what the heck they're talking about. There's no specific numbers. Like you can set at numbers if you want to, and you can go through that process. But at the end of the day, the point of mixing is to get it to sound good, not to get it to look good. No one wants to look at numbers. Like I don't want to look at numbers, right? I just want my stuff to sound good. And so I Just make it sound good. So once again, turn it up, turn it down. If it's starting to distort, bring it down a little bit. If you feel like it's lacking some punch, you can bring it up a little bit. Kind of find a good happy medium, a good balance there. And I've noticed like even the inexperienced people, like as I'm opening up sessions with people, actually diving into their sessions, and they're like maybe they only have like a few months of experience into this. They can immediately tell what sounds good and what doesn't, because they're like turning it up. They're like, oh, I think it's distorting. It's like, yeah, it is. And they turn it down and they're like, but it's losing that punch. And then like they'll find a happy medium and they get very close to where I would have it as well. So quit looking at the numbers. Quit using your eyes so much. Use your ears. Let's use our ears. Okay. The next question that I got was ozone presets make everything either too squashed or too quiet. How do you actually use them properly? Great question. Typically, when it comes to ozone and their presets, I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of mastering bus presets to begin with. I like the presets because they set up a chain, but I don't like what they do to the chain because they have no idea. So for example, if I am going to load up ozone, all right, so let's turn off my everything here for the master, and let me grab ozone 11. It's probably going to make me sign in. It's going to make me sign in. Give me just 2 seconds. So as I set up like the presets and things like that, I like how it sets up the chain. Like it'll set up an EQ and it'll set up a compressor and it'll set up a limiter and all of this other stuff that we have going with it. But typically, I don't necessarily want it all, right? And so I can press play here and I can go through the whole process. So let's take a look, see what it sounds like, right? We have our presets, right? But then we also have the AI tools, which like it does okay. Like if you have no idea what you're doing, this is better than nothing. But I don't think it does as good of a job as it could if you just spent like 10 hours learning mastering. That's like, that's just my opinion. So let's just, for the sake of argument here, let's press play. So immediately says, hey, here's a great starting point, which like, it's okay. But what I like about it is coming up here, clicking here, and then it immediately shows you, okay, so we have some master rebalance, we have some equalizer, some imager, some stabilizer, some dynamic EQ, and then our maximizer. And so it's set up a chain, but I don't necessarily know if I like everything that's here. And so just as a, I mean, if you don't know what you're doing with mastering, like this is better than nothing. But in my opinion, if you spend about 10 hours, 8 to 10 hours learning mastering, even if you're a complete beginner, you can get a better result than this. It's not bad, but so spend some time. Don't just grab the presets. Spend some time learning about what everything does. Once again, go back to the beginning of this video, and I show you like the simple view of what my mastering chain can look like. I didn't even pull up EQ. Like I didn't even have EQ there, and I was getting a really good master. So do that. All right, we are cruising through the questions today. Question number 4. So question number 4 is, Spotify says to hit -14 LUFS, but my favorite songs don't do that. What gives? What gives is that it's just misleading in general. It was a misleading article. Spotify knows that if your song is quieter than somebody else's or your song's louder than somebody else's, that it's going to create a poor experience for Spotify. And people having to pull out their phones constantly and adjust the volume and then put their phone back in their pocket and pull it out and adjust the volume, people are just going to not use Spotify. They have that data and they understand that. And so what they wanted to do was shoot everybody for a specific like LUFS area that they can target. Now, when you go download your favorite songs and use them as reference tracks, nobody is following that -14 LUFS rule. And that's because you don't need to. Spotify is going to do what Spotify does. Your job is to get the best sound possible and send it to Spotify. Now we have the options for lossless audio, which means that people are going to be able to hear your song the way it was intended. And Spotify just released that. So if you were hitting -14 LUFS to optimize for Spotify 4 years ago, well, now people are listening to your song in lossless, and you just did yourself a disservice. So you should not be hitting -14 LUFS. You should be hitting whatever LUFS your typical genre shoots for. For EDM, it might be -6. For rock and metal, it might be -6. For folk music, it might be -10. Download some songs, some of your favorites, pull them into your session, use a meter, like a WLM meter from waves and figure out what LUFS is your favorite song at. And then you can kind of shoot for that as a specific target. All right. I get so passionate about this because it makes me so mad. The amount of times that I get on calls with people, and like, I don't even like, I literally get on a call, try to figure out what's going on, diving into the sessions, and they're like, I'm trying to shoot for -14 loss, but it's just not sounding as loud. It's like, well, yeah, of course it's not. Of course it's not. So yeah, that is what it is. Let me hit some questions real quick. Hey, Alex Bar, Andrew. Could you tell me why there's an issue with the free consultation? No, I show up to every single one. You must have. Did you use the wrong email? If I did you get a cancellation email? Because not every single call I can take. If we're a good fit, and I see that on the application, we go into the call and see if we're a good fit there. But sometimes I cancel the calls, and I always give plenty of notice for canceling the calls. So make sure that you use the right email, and make sure that I didn't cancel your call if I didn't think that we were a good fit, or maybe I was just full that week. Because sometimes like I can only take a certain amount of calls, and so then I have to cancel a handful. So, but no, I always show up to all my calls. So just make sure that you use the right link. Make sure that you use the right email, because sometimes people put in a spoof email, but that's the email I send the link to get on the call. So double check that. Email me if you don't mind at producingthebox@gmail.com, and make sure that we use the right email, and we'll get you set up for another consultation if I feel like I can help you. All right. Question number 5. Oh, and before I get into that, for anybody else that is interested, you want me to open up sessions with you and listen to your music and figure out exactly what's going on and actually be able to help you one-on-one, links to that will be down in the description below. Just click on the Work For Me page. I show you exactly how I help people, and we can talk about that there. All right. Question number 5. Every time I try to get my master louder, my low end turns into complete mush. How do I keep it clean yet still loud? There is an issue with the low end. It's a big issue overall, and that issue is the fact that we don't have a lot of room in the low end. If we look here, we can see 50 hertz and 100 hertz. That's a full octave. Everybody knows, or if you don't know, that 440 hertz is an A note. We can actually see that there's a keyboard here at the bottom of this EQ. Each frequency is relative to a specific note. So that's really important to know. Each frequency is relative to a specific note. So 440 hertz is an A note. Now, if you double that number, so 880, that would be an A note, but an octave higher. So here's 440, an octave higher would be 880, and that's an A note as well. Now, here's where things really get into kind of like a bit of a complex issue, which is if we look here, 50 hertz and 100 hertz is a full octave. But 5,000 hertz and 10,000 hertz is a full octave. And so what happens is there's so much more detail and so much more room in the high end. 5,000 hertz between a full octave between 5,000 and 10,000. And there's 10,000 hertz between 10,000 and 20,000. There's so much more room in the high end, and there's just not a lot of room in the low end. And so the difference between 50 and 60 hertz is multiple notes, not just a couple frequencies. And so you have to be careful about what's in the low end. So if you want your low end to hit, right, and every time you try to get your master louder, you said that your low end starts to turn to complete mush. You need to make a decision on what's in the low end, and I call it the hero method, which is what's going to be the hero. In my mix, the kick is going to be the thing that's in the low end, and then I want my bass, and then I have a synth bass. Those are the only 3 things, and they're all in the right key. So I'm making sure. And once again, kick in the right key, no, it's just a specific transient. Like unless there's like a long tail or something like that, I don't really worry about that. And so I have my kick, and I have my bass. So what I can do here is let's go through and add an EQ to the end. And I learned this back in when I used to make a lot of EDM. It's called the coat room trick. And what you want to do is you just want to like check your mix and see what it's going to sound like in the coat room when you're playing it at a club or a show or something like that. And so what I want to do is I want to take a high cut, put it at the end of my mastering chain, and I want to just keep rolling off the frequencies until I'm all the way down to the low end. And then I want to listen to the low end and see if there's anything that's fighting down there. So you can see it sounds like really tight, really consistent. If you're listening on a phone, gonna have a hard time hearing that. But it sounds really tight, sounds really consistent, and I can hear the kick and I can hear the notes. Right now, if you roll it down and it just sounds like a mess and you can't hear the notes, you can't really hear what's going on with the kick, then you need to go back into the actual production process and figure out, like, did you add too much? Did you add too many kicks? Do you have like 7 different kick layers? Do you have like all of this other stuff? Try to just have 2 or 3 things that's filling in that low end and then cut everything else out. All right. Hopefully that makes sense. Question number 6. Is multiband compression actually needed for mastering rock and metal, or is it overkill? I don't think, I like the fact that you're asking the question, but you can use multiband compression in every genre, right? And is it overkill or is it not overkill? It all depends. And I hate answering questions like this of like, it just depends. But like, if you ever watch a YouTuber and they're like, this is the way it is all the time, like they just genuinely don't know what they're talking about. Like maybe they're not lying to you. Maybe they just don't have enough experience to know when that specific thing they say is always true is not true. For example, always hitting -14 LUFS is not true. Or always having, like, rolling off the low end and everything but the bass and kick. That's just not always true. And so when somebody says that, they're not lying to you. They just don't have enough context and enough experience to know when those specific rules aren't true. Hopefully that makes sense. So when it comes to multiband compression, typically I want to know, like, when do I need multiband compression? I think that's the question you're asking, is like, when is it needed? So multiband compression is essentially like EQ. You're turning down specific frequencies, but it's doing it automatically. So dynamic EQ and multiband compression are kind of like 2 sides of the same coin. Can be very helpful. And so specifically, let's say I want to control some of the low end. So typically in rock and metal, I may use multiband compression to control some of the low end on my electric guitars. So let's take a look and see what that actually sounds like. I'm going to grab, I think SSL G3 multiband compressor. Once again, it doesn't matter. I have a set of plugins I like using all the time. It doesn't matter. Like, don't look at this and think that you have to have this, but if you do have it, awesome. It is a great compressor. So what I want to do is I want to control some of the low end frequencies here, and get a little bit of gain reduction there. So I'm just getting a little bit of compression on the low end, and this is specifically useful in gent, like when you're going like dun 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 and you're doing palm mutes. Typically there's a lot of low end buildup that happens during that time, and using some multiband compression can be helpful. You can also use it on drums to get control over the low end, over the mid range, over the high end, and use it on your drum bus. Typically I will use multiband compression on my guitars, my electric guitars, and typically try to like control some of that low end, and specifically on chugs and things like that, because like when you do palm mutes, it just like enhances that a lot. And then sometimes on my actual drums themselves, sometimes I want a little bit of compression just on the mid range, or sometimes I want it on the high end to kind of control those cymbals or something, and then I can just throw it on the drum bus itself. But that's typically where I have it. It's not necessary, and in fact, actually, I think in this mix here, I'm not using it at all, except for the plugin I just throw it on now. So like all of this stuff where you think like it's the key to happiness, it's the key to success, it's just not. It's just not. Like it can help squeak out a little bit, but like they're like 1, 2, 3% changes, or 5, 10% changes at max. There's like the silver bullet, the magic sauce that you're looking for is writing a great song and performing it in a way that's really tight and really good, and having great guitar tones and tuning your drums well and making sure that your drums sound great. That's the secret sauce you're missing in a mix. It's never like this stuff. This stuff helps, but it only enhances something. I like to think of it as clearing the water in a pond, clearing some pond water, where you can't see the bottom of the pond. As soon as you clear the pond water, all of a sudden now you can see everything that's there. That's what mixing does. It clears the pond water. It's showing you what's at the bottom. It's showing you the core of the song. So if the core of the song is not good, and you have not tuned things well, and you have not performed things well, when you start to clean things up in the mix, it just starts to fall apart. I was working with one of my students, and we were trying to get his guitar tone tightened. And as soon as we tightened up his guitar tone, he started to realize his performance was out of time because he couldn't hear the performance well. As soon as he like tightened it up, we got a good solid mix on his guitar tone and tweaked it. He realized that his performance was out of time, and he had to go back and redo his performance. And now his mix sounds incredible now. Sounds way, way better. And so mixing just clears things up. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. Question number 7. My limiter is just straight up clipping even at low gain. Why does my mix fall apart so easily when I push it? Simple. You're not giving yourself enough headroom. So typically what I like to do is I should be able to turn off every plugin here on my master bus. And I should be having some headroom. I might not have headroom here. Let's just take a look. I should have some headroom. Yeah, so you can see I'm actually above this. And so if I go over here, this is why I have the mix tool on, and actually I'm bringing down the volume here, right? So you see that I'm bringing down the volume. Now I have some headroom. Right? And so once again, just put a like a proper gain staging, and even then, like putting a gain plugin at the beginning of your master bus, and then you can kind of like adjust that up or down can be really helpful. Then I have my clipper. I'm going into my clipper, so it's controlling any of those loud parts. So we were just at, so without the clipper, what were we sitting at? So negative 0.6, negative 0.9. If I turn on the clipper, I should have a little bit more headroom. So there we are, negative 2. So that clipper is actually kind of controlling some of those transients, some of those peaks. It's kind of turning it down for me. And then now that I have like negative 2, negative 3 dB of headroom, I can then actually push my limiter a bit harder. So you just don't have proper gain staging set up. And once again, like you can even just throw it, like you can do it the lazy way and just throw a gain plugin right at the beginning and like adjust it up or down and see if that works. But once again, I do think it's helpful to know proper gain staging. You can see that I didn't really do a very good job of it here, and yet the mix still sounds good. So at the end of the day, like, it's just gain structure. So make sure you're giving yourself enough headroom before you go into your limiter. All right. Question number 8. And once again, throw some questions in the chat too, some more of those, and I will do a couple bonus at the end. Question number 8 is, how long do you keep clarity in the guitars and vocals when pushing for louder mixes? Mine always gets dull. This is really kind of like a classic case of like clarity and loudness trade-off. There's two camps, kind of, but I like to think of it as two camps. It's not necessarily true. There's always some nuance, but I think of it like this. We have one camp where people are like, there's the the clarity and separation camp. People want clarity and separation, right? And then there's the other camp where people want that what I like to call the wall of sound, right? And so clarity and separation, I want to be able to hear the bass properly by itself and the guitars and everything all properly by itself, and I want that clarity and separation, right? And then there's other people that are like, I want a wall of sound, and I want this thing sounding absolutely massive, as much as I possibly can. And that's a balance that you have to have. Do you want the wall of sound? Do you want the clarity and separation? I'm not a big fan of the clarity and separation because people are supposed to listen to your music as a whole, not individually. And so if you're like, I'm optimizing for everything to have perfect separation, I think you're actually kind of causing it a disservice. Things should sound like a whole, an entire song playing as a whole. But that's not, I'm not saying that if you do optimize for clarity and separation, that's a problem. I'm just saying, think of why you're doing that. Why do you want the clarity and separation? Is because your favorite mix that you're listening to and the one that you're using as a reference track is using clarity and separation? Or do they have more of like a wall of sound? And it's just like this massive kind of like just boosh wall of sound that's going right to me. So it's a balance. I kind of like to fall into the camp of, right, so we have the wall of sound, we have the clarity and separation, yeah, I kind of like set somewhere in the middle, more towards the wall of sound. I like big, loud mixes in the wall of sound, and sometimes like I might actually lose a little bit of clarity, a little bit of separation, and even some dynamics to get that louder, more wall of sound. That's my typical style. That's the way I like to run, but not everybody's like that, and so understand which direction should you go, and then you can make decisions based off of that. If you're a more wall of sound kind of person, you're going to be adding layers in like this. So for example, these guitars and the bass and everything like that are all layered together. I have a synth that's layering alongside the guitars. And then I have the bass that's layering with it. And then, of course, I have the guitars. And I'm like trying to make this sound like one gigantic instrument. If I was going for clarity and separation, then I probably wouldn't have that synth there. And if I did have that synth there, it wouldn't sound like that. It would sound like something different. So once again, keep in mind, clarity and separation or that wall of sound, figure out like, and it's not one or the other. You're on that spectrum. How far onto that spectrum are you? Do you want to be more on that wall of sound side? Do you want to be more on the clarity and separation side? Listen to some of your favorite songs and their mixes and figure out where along that path that works best for you. And then just go for that. All right. Hopefully that answers your question. Let's go into question number 9. Could my masters be quiet because my room and monitors are lying to me? How big of a deal is that in mastering? It's a big deal. It's a really big deal. Actually, hey, come here. It's a really big deal. It's a really big deal. So let me explain why. When you set up your mastering or your room, you set up your room and you should have it set like this. If you don't, look at where your speakers are right now and go set it up as quickly as you possibly can this way. So we have one speaker that's here. All right. You know, we have our tweeter and then our woofer. We have another speaker that's here. So we have our 2 speakers. And then we're sitting somewhere here, right? I'm just going to do like a little smiley face. Give that guy, yay, he's happy. The distance between each speaker should be equal distance from the speaker to your ear. So for example, if this is 3 foot from side to side, then also this speaker to your ear should be 3 foot. It should be a perfect triangle. And the reason is because sound travels in waves. So sound, typically it goes like this. We've seen this a lot, where it kind of gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Well, if you actually take a look, it's creating a triangle shape. And so in order to avoid some of the phase issues and other things that we could possibly have, to get a pure like stereo image, we want to make sure that we're setting it up in a perfect triangle. Now, this is where it gets even worse. Oh, it's so bad. When you set up your room, there's a thing called first reflections. So your speakers now, okay, we're all happy now. We got our speakers set up like this. Well, now our speakers are creating sound. Ooh, that is definitely not the color that I want. Let's go orange. So now our speakers are pushing out some sound, right? So now they're pushing out some sound. They're sounding great. We're really happy, right? And so it's being pushed directly to us. Ideally, like you have the speaker kind of curved a bit to you, okay? But for the sake of argument here and just for the sake of this drawing, I want to show you here. So now we have a wall that's over here. Boom. This is right here is called a first reflection point. And so wherever that hits first is then going to hit there and then it's going to come back to you. And so now you're hearing another like degraded version of that sound. And so if you have speakers in your room and you do not have acoustic treatment up in your room, you are hearing like about 50-60% of what you're hearing is coming from around the room and off the walls. Not from the speakers. The other 40% or 30% is coming from the speakers. Even if you have proper acoustic treatment set up in your room, like I do here, you're still getting around 40% of what you're hearing is coming from around the room and being reverberated around, hitting off the first reflections. So I recommend learning how to do mastering inside of headphones. Get a good pair of headphones, learn them really well, and then just eliminate the room entirely. For a lot of us like home producers, and we can't have like an entire mastering like room built, then typically headphones are going to be a better option. You can always check in monitors, but like just learn your headphones. Now, if you're really adamant about this and you're like, Andrew, you have acoustic treatment set up, you use your monitors, how do I do the same? Well, let me show you. So we saw our wall, that's right here. And we know that our sound is traveling in this triangle, right? And so we have our first reflection point. Well, I'm going to show you something really cool. And this blew my mind when I heard it for the first time. How do we find out where those first reflection points are? Well, here's the cool part. Sound and light all travel in waves. I'm more than just a hat rack, you guys. And so what happens is what you can do is you can put a mirror. So I had my wife come in and hold a mirror on the wall, and I sat in my room. So my speakers were 3 foot apart or 2 foot apart or whatever they are. And then I made sure that I'm sitting in that perfect spot. And then I had my wife put a mirror on the wall, and I just looked at it from where my spot was. And as soon as I could see that speaker cone in the mirror, That's the first reflection point, and that's where you put acoustic treatment on. And so, boom, you just run the mirror along the wall. This is that first reflection point. It's coming here, and it's coming back to you here. So right here, we just put some acoustic treatment up on the wall, and we're good to go. All right, so when you do get a chance to set up your room, I highly recommend this. For those of you guys that are like, how do we get acoustic treatment? How do we do this? I built these myself. It's actually really affordable to do so, and it's better than anything you can pretty much buy that I've found, unless you like hire a company to build stuff for you. I have an entire blueprint, like the blueprints and the video guide. Links to that are down in the description below. I will make sure that I put them there. For those of you guys that are on live, just come back after this becomes a recording, and I'll make sure that I throw that in there later. But yeah, it's completely free. I have my entire build guide and blueprints and everything. Like, I show you everything, and I actually used bed sheets for the fabric. To make sure that, like, it's cheap, and it also works really well. So anyway, really cool stuff. So anyway, nevertheless, that's how this works. And so if you're like, is my room lying to me? Yes, it is. It absolutely is lying to you. I was talking with Chris Baseford, which is the mixing and mastering engineer and the producer for people like Daughtry, Nickelback, things like that. And he was saying that, and it may have even been in like one of his videos as well. He's got a great YouTube channel. Highly recommend going and follow him. But he had mentioned that he has this dip in his room at around 100 hertz, or a boost. I think it was a dip. Yeah, so it was a dip at about 100 hertz in his room. And what he did was he turned the crossover off from his speakers to a subwoofer, and so it kind of like artificially inflated that 100 hertz, but it kind of like made up for the difference in his room. So once again, like, you need to understand that what you're hearing from your speakers is not always true. It's not always accurate. And so you want to make sure that, like, you're getting control over your room if you can. And if you can't, it's just so simple. Headphones. Like, it takes the room out of the picture. And it's gone. Like, I no longer need to worry about my room. So just learn how to use headphones. Headphones are great. You know, the people that say that you have to have speakers, it's not true. All right. Question number 9. Oh, no. Now we already hit number 9. All right. So we're hitting on to 10. Just a reminder, if you want to work with me, links to that are down in the description below. I show you exactly how to work with me there, go through the whole process. And if we're a good fit, we'll get on a call and we'll go from there. All right. And also throw in some extra questions if you guys will, because after the question 10, I'm going to throw in some bonuses. All right. Question 10. I got a question, and it said, he says, what's the actual mastering chain for metal? Everyone says something different, but is there even a perfect chain, or are we all just guessing? And we're not guessing, but we're making decisions based off of what we're hearing. And once again, like, go back to the beginning of this video. For if you're wondering how I'm getting these questions, some of the people will actually email me directly. So links to my email list are down below as well. You can join over, I think it's like 12,000 people now that read my weekly newsletter. And when people actually click respond, I read those emails. And so I'm able to pull a lot of questions from those. So if you want to ask me a question, that's one of the best ways to ask me a question. And so I was able to pull up a bunch of ones that people are talking about mastering. And so the mastering chain itself is just about translation. I just want it to sound good from one to the next. Back in the old days, like when people would print stuff to records, and I mean, we still do that to this day now, but the needle would bounce out of the groove if it was too loud and too dynamic. And so they had to make some sacrifices, and so they did mastering, so that way everything would be somewhat the same. So that way from one song to the next, it was all fine, and the needle wasn't jumping in and out of the groove. And then it got to consumer devices, and we started having tapes, and too much signal going into tape would start to saturate it, like tape saturation, right? And not enough signal would be a little too quiet. And so we had mastering engineers to control that. And then we got into the CD days, and they had a thing called the Red Book Standard, where the Red Book Standard basically meant that a lot of consumer device companies like Sony and RCA, they were getting upset because some of the stuff wasn't sounding as good as it was. So, for example, if you had a really loud CD, Sony's converters might be better than RCA's, or vice versa. I don't remember the specifics, but they wanted some consistency across the board, right? So that way, no matter what, like, they knew that they weren't going to get hit with a ton of signal, and their converters weren't going to be able to handle it. So they come up with a thing called the Red Book Standard, where 16-bit wave 44,100 is what it was, 44,100 kilohertz, and just a standard loudness. So it's all about translation. Mastering is about translation, making it sound good from one room, from your room to the car, to your phone speakers, to your Google Homes, and everything else. And so that's what That's what it is. And so when again, it's like, what is the perfect chain? It's just, there is no perfect chain. My perfect chain for me is different for everybody else. And it's my perfect chain changes. It actually changes. Every now and then I'm grabbing, I'm using some clipping. Every now and then I don't use some clipping if I don't feel like it needs it. Sometimes I have 2 compressors or 3 compressors. Sometimes I have 1. Sometimes I have 0 compressors on my mix bus. So it all just depends. But if you're like looking for like a standard to start with, go to the beginning of this video, watch that entire mastering chain process from start to finish, and so that we actually understand what that looks like. All right, let's hit some questions inside of the chat as well. Are you supposed to look at LUFS integrated instead of LUFS short term? Fantastic question. I'm glad you said this. So yes, you are supposed to look at LUFS integrated, but I was making some changes on the fly, and the LUFS integrated would lie. So the LUFS short term looks at the last 3 seconds. So if I go here, see my LUFS long term, it's still sitting at -6. Like it's just, that's the long term. It's just going to look at the whole song. And so if I make a bunch of changes, I actually have to click reset. There's a reset button somewhere along in here. There it is, right here. So I have to click reset, and then I can go back to that that -6. I believe that's where it's at. But nevertheless, then you have your short term. So let's play our short term here. Oh, yeah, there it is, reset. All right, so once again, that short term is saying 6, and now you can see that that long term is saying 6. Now you can see that short term is like going back up because it's looking at the last 3 seconds. So the difference between short term and long term basically boils down to how long is it looking for. And so if you make adjustments and you make changes to your master bus and you want another accurate view of this, you need to click that reset button so it goes back to normal, because that long term will just hold it for the duration of the song. So yeah, when I was giving you that example, I was showing you the short term so that way you could look at the past 3 seconds, and then turning it on and off, so that way I didn't have to go through and like reset everything. All right, hopefully that makes sense. What are some other questions? I use a clipper and limiter, but they are still not loud enough. I hear songs on YouTube, they're louder than my songs. This is where things can kind of get pretty tough, right? So if you're using a clipper and a limiter, it might be the actual the sounds that you're using. Like, are you using like sounds that sound really good, like the drums, and is everything fitting the way it's supposed to? This is like a perfect time to, like, if you're interested and you want some help with any of the stuff, like diving into your sessions, feel free to book a call. Links to that are down in the description below. And I'll actually be able to listen to some of your music. When you go to book that call, you can submit your music and I can listen to it beforehand. And we'll go there as well. Yeah, okay, you got the full LUFS around -5, but isn't YouTube put the LUFS down to -14? From my understanding, they don't. You're not getting like the perfect sound. But no, like I've downloaded songs and then brought it into like the DAW, like from YouTube, like recorded a small segment of stuff that I've worked on just to see. And like it does mangle the audio a little bit, but like not down to -14. So that's been my experience. So yeah, if you do want some help, links to that are down in the description below. I can kind of listen to your song and see kind of like where you're at, and kind of dive into a little bit more of what that actually looks like. And then if we're a good fit, we can talk about working together. If not, you'll still walk away knowing what's up. That is, if I feel like I can actually help you after I go through the application process and see. Okay. Super helpful info. Very fascinating details. Love that. Love to see that, Taylor. Great stuff, man. I think that's about it. I think those are all the questions. So I'm going to end it here. Fantastic day, you guys. If you want to ask questions, join the email list. Links to that are down in the description below. And if you just wanted to work directly with me and you want me to open up sessions with you and take a look at what that actually looks like for you specifically, click the page. When you click on the Work For Me page, there's going to be an entire page that like shows you how I help people. See if it actually makes sense for you. Like some people, like they don't want that kind of help. Makes total sense. So yeah, links to that are down in the description below, and I'll make sure it's in the pinned comments. All right, I'll see you guys all very soon in the next 10 questions in the next live streams that I do. All right, talk soon.